right, The Power of Mindful Learning by Ellen Langer. This is a review and an analysis. She quotes Camus, "True artists score nothing. They are obliged to understand rather than to judge." That's our job as educators. It is the monotonous repetition and fear of negative evaluation that is effortful, not work itself. A lack of novelty and the constant feeling of being evaluated are very stressful, Langer writes. So can we, find a way to turn the students' work into something that's novel? Can we find a way to make them kind of forget they are being evaluated and to focus on the work and the process itself? If we can mindfully attend to the different aspects of a situation, we can experience it differently. We know that this is something that we want to teach to students. It's something we want them to see, but it's something we have to see too. We can rewrite our assignments in conditional rather than absolute language. Pluto was a planet, then it wasn't, then it was again. Conditional language allows us to kind of reevaluate things. Stressful evaluations for teachers and students, she says, should be eliminated. Test what a student knows rather than what's lacking, and then have the student look for answers. Look for the means by the answers other than looking for errors alone. Try to appreciate the power of uncertainty. Try to see how everything's changing and looks different from different perspectives. And in talking about this and admitting it, we can all become more comfortable in the classroom not knowing things. To be mindful, she says, is to be confident and uncertain. Langer talks about myths of education. The myths are 1 through 7, that the basics must be learned so well that they become second nature. This is not true, she says. Paying attention means staying focused on one thing at a time. Not true, Langer says. Delaying gratification is important. Apparently not. Rote memorization is necessary. She says no. Forgetting is a problem. Nope, it's common. Intelligence is knowing what's out there. Not quite. And there are right and wrong answers. Langer says those are myths. We need to stop adhering to them in education. When we drill ourselves on a certain skill so much that it becomes second nature, does that lead to us performing the skill mindlessly? Do we set limits on ourselves by practicing to the point of overlearning? Does it make sense to freeze our understanding of a skill before we try it in different contexts at various stages, adjusting it to our own strengths and experiences? If we overlearn the drill, we essentially lose sight of the individual components, and we find it hard to make small adjustments, which is why when I encounter students, the only thing they know how to do is to write a Creek paragraph. They don't know how to change their writing depending on what they're writing about. Creek paragraphs are how we teach paragraph writing where I am. If we learn the basics but don't overlearn them, we can vary them so that we can change as the situation demands. Experts become experts in part by being able to vary basic skills. The rest of us, taught not to question, just take this for granted. Teaching skills and facts in a conditional way sets the stage for doubt and an awareness of how different situations absolutely call for subtle differences in what we bring to them. If we overlearn a task so much that we perform it by rote, the individual steps that make up the skill come together into larger and larger units, and as a consequence, the smaller components of the activity are essentially lost. It is by adjusting and varying those pieces that we can improve our performance. Teaching material conditionally allows students to manipulate information creatively in different contexts, Langer writes. The more we learn the basics with the recognition from the start that there are several, perhaps quite disparate ways of accounting for information, the more we are open to alternatives. Mindful learning is about openness to novelty. It's about an alertness to distinction, sensitivity to different contexts, implicit, if not explicit, awareness of multiple perspectives, and an orientation in the present. Learning a skill or subject with an openness to novelty and actively noticing differences, contexts, and perspectives, which she calls sideways learning, makes us receptive to changes in an ongoing situation like our life, which is full of nonstop changes. Getting our experience pre-sliced in parts undermines the opportunity to reach mindful awareness. Instead, attend to multiple ways of carving up the same domain. Greater effectiveness and mastery may be accessible through inventive transformations of the routine, which I've always believed, and yet I was constantly told at teaching school, routine, kids love routine, kids love routine. They do to a point, and then they fall asleep, maybe. When creative use of information is required, they outperform others who are not asked to be creative. So understand the problem of attention, but shift your perspective. Remember that those who we claim are distracted are actually just otherwise engaged. This has been huge for me. Instead of getting annoyed with students' obsession with social media and cell phones, which isn't their fault, it's the fault of the adults, the tech companies who should be, every tech mogul should be thrown in jail for what they've done to the American population. That's Mr. Sherman's opinion, not Ms. Langer's opinion. But nonetheless, they're not distracted. They're otherwise engaged. And what I'm offering is not as interesting as what they're otherwise engaged and attracted to. And I need to accept the responsibility for trying to bring them back to me. Not that that's easy. It's almost impossible. Trying to hold an idea is difficult and unnatural, Langer says. Novelty is important to get people to pay attention, so seek out that novelty to hook to enhance performance. The promise of a big payoff in the future, it actually decreases our appreciation of the present. When we're constantly drilling these students to, this is for your future, they're not focusing on the present. The future is made in the present. Don't even think about the future. Do now what needs to be done to build a good future, and your future will get better. But if we're constantly telling them, this will pay off in the future, they're going to avoid the present, there's going to be a decreased appreciation for the present, and then their futures will actually be worse, counterintuitively. If we assume an activity is play, we approach it non-evaluatively and proceed to get involved in it. That's why every time we play board games, the students love it. The board games are about the content, but they love it. They don't love me lecturing. I love to lecture. Obviously, here I am doing it for free. See if students can notice 3 to 6 novel aspects about an activity to increase enjoyment of the same. Increased exposure to unfamiliar stimuli has the effect of increasing liking. She says, pleasure is the state of being brought about by what you learn, and learning is the process of entering into the experience of this kind of pleasure. No pleasure, no learning. No learning, no pleasure. Excuse me, that's Wayne Ken from A Song of Joy. That's their words, not Langer's. Memorization is a strategy for taking a material that has no personal meaning, she claims. If we think about how certain parts of the information remind you of past, present, or future experiences, and think about how the information could be important to you or someone else, and try to find significance in relation of the material to anyone or anything, again, thinking from multiple perspectives here. Groups shown examples have trouble forgetting the examples in order to come up with new creative work. That's why every time I have an example of something, students just replicate the example almost verbatim. They don't stretch and become creative. You're supposed to show students exemplars and examples. Okay, I do. And then what do? They do the exact same thing of the example. No creativity. It's extremely frustrating. Langer says this is why. An expert, she says, is somebody that can predict events within an area of expertise more accurately than a naive observer. These are my notes on Ellen Langer's The Power of Mindful Learning. See if they're useful to you, and if so, good luck. Employ them in your classroom.